Guys, I have the honor of bringing to stage Dr. Rhonda Patrick. So let me tell you a little bit about her. I have been a fan. I've been fangirling her for quite a while. She is a biomedical scientist, health educator, and founder of Found My Fitness, where she has inspired millions of people around the world to take control of their health through evidence-based nutrition and lifestyle strategies. She earned her PhD in biomedical science, conducted groundbreaking research at St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital right here in Tennessee, completed her postdoctoral fellowship under renowned scientist Dr. Bruce Ames, and has also conducted aging research at the Salk Institute. Today, her work bridges cutting-edge science with practical actions that help people live longer, healthier lives. I'm sure many of you have listened to her on podcasts like the Huberman Lab, Mel Robbins, or even her own. She is emerging as an authoritative voice in the field of longevity. Shaklee family, please help me give a warm welcome to Dr. Rhonda Patrick.
I'll never get used to this. I'll never get used to this. This is how I want to live.
So much. Hi, hello everyone. Man, is this a cool venue or what? I walked in, I was like, I should have brought my guitar. I'm super excited to be here today. And as Elizabeth mentioned, I do have a PhD in biomedical science. I've done research in the lab with pipettes and petri dishes and worms and mice and people. Everything from aging to nutrition, metabolism, cancer, just a pretty broad range, which gives me, I think, a unique perspective on healthy aging and delaying age-related disease and how much our lifestyle and what we do in our lifestyle can play a really important role in how healthy we are, how happy we are, how much energy we have, and how we can avoid these age-related diseases as long as possible, like cardiovascular disease, like cancer, like Alzheimer's disease or Parkinson's disease, so that we can be youthful when we're in our 80s and our 90s and doing the things we enjoy. So today, we're going to talk about just a few, what I like to call the low-hanging fruits, the things that are like you can just pluck them off the tree. They're really low. You don't need to go really high up. You don't need to put that much effort in terms of just little changes that make a big difference in the way we age. So we're going to focus a lot on micronutrients and avoiding those micronutrient insufficiencies and how easy it is to do that by just supplementing. And we're also going to talk a little bit about the role of NAD and what NAD is and why it's so important for the way we age. So let's get started. And the goal I have today is to really arm you guys with evidence that you can use to educate yourself, educate people out there on the internet, educate your customers, educate your family, to help them improve the way they age. So hopefully you guys find some value out of today's talk. All right, so we're going to talk first and foremost about optimizing micronutrient intake, and we're going to focus on some of the big players here. We're going to talk about vitamin D, omega-3, magnesium, and then we're also going to talk about a multivitamin. So let's start with vitamin D, and it's kind of misrepresentation because vitamin D is a vitamin, but actually it gets converted into a steroid hormone. So it is going inside the nucleus of your cells where all your DNA is, and it's actually binding to these little regions of DNA, and it's turning on genes and it's turning off genes, and it's doing over 1,000 of those. So like 5% of your human genome is being regulated by this hormone, vitamin D. And yet, 70% of the US population has insufficient and inadequate levels of vitamin D. I mean, can you imagine walking around. I mean, well, I guess a lot of women that have gone through menopause know. I mean, estrogen is a steroid hormone, and when those levels drop, lots of things go wrong. The same thing happens with vitamin D because it's also a steroid hormone. So we're going to talk about why it's so important and why insufficiency is so prevalent, and the simple solution, which is essentially supplementing with a vitamin D supplement. Typically 4,000 IUs is enough to fill that insufficient gap. But the reason why vitamin D3 and the vitamin D hormone is so, in terms of deficiency and insufficiency, is so prevalent is because we do make it from UVB radiation from the sun. So that means UVB rays have to reach your skin. It's made in the skin. And anything that blocks out those UVB rays, like sunscreen or clothing or melanin, which is that dark, pigmentation that acts as a natural sunscreen, is going to block the ability of your body to make vitamin D3. Also, where you live plays a role, so latitude, because depending on where you are in the country, if you're on the East Coast, if you're in Chicago, for example, many months out of the year, UVB rays aren't even reaching the atmosphere, so you can't even make vitamin D3. Age also plays a role, so a 70-year-old makes 4 times less vitamin D3 in their skin than their former 20-year-old self. So you're talking about a very insufficient process. And then body fat is another thing that regulates vitamin D3 bioavailability. The more body fat you have, because vitamin D3 is a fat-soluble vitamin, it's stored in fat. And if you have a lot of subcutaneous fat, that means it's less bioavailable to get released into the bloodstream, where it then goes to the kidneys. It's converted into the major circulating form of vitamin D, the liver, and then onto the kidneys, where it's converted into the hormone. So you're talking about a 50% reduction in bioavailability. So people that have a higher body fat percentage also typically have lower vitamin D levels. So that's the reason why vitamin D is so, in terms of deficiency, is so prevalent. I want to talk about the role in aging. I talked about how it's regulating 5% of that human genome. Many genes that are involved in aging are being regulated by vitamin D3. But before we talk about humans, I just want to show you these little rodents here. A lot of times we use mice as, research models for aging because their life expectancy is only 2.5 years, as opposed to, 75 to 80 years in humans. So if you look at the mice on my slides here, on the top panel, the mouse on the left is a vitamin D deficient mouse. It doesn't have a receptor for vitamin D, so vitamin D can't act on the cells in its body. The mouse on the right is just a normal wild type lab mouse. Those are 4.5 years of age. On the bottom panel, you can see the same mice aged 4 months later. They're 8.5 months old. The vitamin D deficient mouse is an accelerating aging model. So you look at that mouse and you go, wow, that mouse looks terrible. It looks like a progeria mouse. Its skin is wrinkled, it's losing its hair, but also on the inside, the organs are also aging. The bones are very brittle, its organs are aging, kidneys are malfunctioning. So in general, it highlights just what happens in these rodents when vitamin D deficiency is happening throughout life. Now, obviously, we are not mice. There are actually a lot of differences. But as I mentioned, it is striking to see that picture of the mouse aging. In fact, a lot of people just want to go out and buy a vitamin D supplement right after seeing that, myself included. Let's talk about the human data, because there's a lot of human data, but you're not going to have a study like that where you can really show causation. There are thousands of studies out there that are observational. They're looking at correlations. Vitamin D deficiency, vitamin D insufficiency, and we're going to talk about those levels in a little bit, is correlated with a higher all-cause mortality. That means you're dying from a lot of non-accidental deaths, like respiratory disease, like cancer, like dementia, for example. But the argument is, well, people that are vitamin D insufficient or deficient might just be less healthy. Maybe they're not going outside as much and exercising in the sun, or they're just generally not health conscious. And so researchers try to basically try to account for all those possibilities, but you never really can do it. And so what scientists have done is they've turned to genetics, because vitamin D3 is made in the skin from the sun, but in order to convert it into the hormone, we have enzymes in our body that do that. And those enzymes are produced by genes, and people have different variations in genes. Some people have variations where those enzymes aren't working as efficiently, and so they genetically have low vitamin D levels, completely independent of their lifestyle. It's called Mendelian randomization. It's kind of like a way for scientists to do a randomized controlled trial using genetics, but looking at outcomes that are related to lifestyle, to our nutrition, to vitamins and minerals. So it really helps establish more causation. And what we find is that people with genetically low vitamin D levels have a higher all-cause mortality than people that have genetically normal levels of vitamin D. They have a higher respiratory-related mortality. And that really makes a lot of sense because vitamin D hormone is regulating a lot of genes involved in immune function. Very important. In fact, there have been randomized controlled trials showing that people who supplement with a vitamin D3 supplement can actually lower their risk of getting upper respiratory tract infections by as much as 25% compared to a placebo control. We also see that people with genetically low vitamin D levels have a higher cancer-related mortality. This is also very, very convincing because there are randomized controlled trials. There was a very large study called the VITAL study. It had a lot of different aspects to it, but one of the arms of that study was looking at a vitamin D3 supplement. In this case, it was 2,000 IUs a day for 5 years. And those individuals that took that vitamin D supplement had a lower cancer mortality compared to the placebo control. So really this data, when you start to see multiple lines of evidence showing the same thing, it's really convincing, and it's hard to make the argument that we're just looking at people that are healthier in general. It really is convincing that it has to do with the vitamin D3. We also know that vitamin D supplementation can lower biological age in people that are deficient. And we're going to talk a little bit more in detail about biological age in a little bit, so I'll get into more of that in a minute. But just looking at multiple studies, this is one study that I'm showing you here, where people that were vitamin D deficient were given 4,000 IUs of vitamin D a day for about 4 months, and it reversed their biological aging, which was accelerated because of the deficiency, by about 2 years. And so you might go, well, 2 years, yeah, but that's after 4 months, and that's going to be cumulative, right? So if you're deficient in that vitamin D, you're going to be accelerating that aging by 2 years, and so you want to not do that. You don't want age acceleration, right? You want to slow aging. You don't want to accelerate it. So it's really, like I mentioned, this is one study. There was a very, very large study that was done in Germany, like 20,000 participants, showed something similar. It only happens in people that are insufficient or deficient in vitamin D. If you're already getting enough vitamin D, it's not going to necessarily slow aging. The point is that you're accelerating your aging when you're not getting that vitamin D because it is a hormone. It is regulating over 5% of your protein encoding human genome. Many genes involved in longevity, including neurotransmitters, immune function, cancer-related genes, are very much regulated by vitamin D, so you don't want to be deficient or insufficient in it. We also know that vitamin D deficiency can dramatically increase dementia risk. Again, we've got like hundreds of studies out there showing vitamin D deficiency, when you look at the aggregate of those studies, is associated with like an 80% increased risk in dementia. And again, all the critics out there might go, well, people that are vitamin D deficient are just unhealthy. Fair argument. So then we turn to the genetics. This is in the same study. They looked at the genetics, the genetically low vitamin D3 levels. Turns out people still had about a 54% increased risk in dementia. So there was a little bit of that healthier user bias that was corrected. But still, you're talking over 50% increased risk in dementia. And we also have studies showing that vitamin D supplementation actually lowers dementia risk by 40%. So when you're looking at all these variables and everything is pointing in the same direction, it's hard to disregard that data. it's really, to me, obvious that vitamin D is important to prevent dementia. And that makes a lot of sense because vitamin D is regulating a lot of genes in the brain. One of them is the clotho. You may have heard of that. Clotho, it's involved with long life and longevity, but more importantly, it's involved with cognition, and it's involved with protecting against dementia and Alzheimer's disease. In fact, it's a pharmaceutical target right now. There are companies out there trying to make a drug that can target this pathway because it is so robust in protecting against dementia and Alzheimer's disease. And yet, that gene that's making clotho is under control of vitamin D hormone. So, simple solution there yet again, avoid deficiency and insufficiency by taking a vitamin D3 supplement. We also know that vitamin D deficiency structurally accelerates brain aging. So when you look by fMRI at the brain, as people age, and you can see these little white spots that can show up in the brain. They're called white matter hyperintensities. They look like little white dots. And that's essentially, it's a breakdown in the white matter in the brain, and it's associated with a very specific type of vascular dementia. And if you're vitamin D deficient in a dose-dependent manner, you'll see more and more of those white matter hyperintensities. You do not want to see those. So for every 10 nanomole per liter decrease in vitamin D, there was an increase in these white matter hyperintensities. So we can see even structurally, vitamin D deficiency can accelerate brain aging. And lastly, I think very strong data here from randomized placebo-controlled trials. It doesn't get any better than that. We have two big trials that were done, one with participants that actually had Alzheimer's disease, and one with participants that had mild cognitive decline. So they didn't quite have Alzheimer's disease yet, but they were clearly on their way to dementia. Both those trials were placebo-controlled. The treatment group got 800 IUs of vitamin D3, in my opinion, a pretty low dose, but some is better than none. Or they got a placebo control. And after 1 year, both of those trials showed improvements in cognition, in memory, executive function. The Alzheimer's disease participants also had lower biomarkers of amyloid beta 42, which is the protein that's involved in the pathology of Alzheimer's disease. It aggregates outside of neurons, it disrupts synapses. So it was shown that vitamin D3 could lower that biomarker of Alzheimer's disease and improve cognition. So really, I think everything I've just showed you with respect to dementia risk, Alzheimer's disease risk, and vitamin D deficiency, insufficiency is pretty strong. It's all pointing to the same, I would say, data point, which is you do not want to be vitamin D deficient or insufficient, and you can take a vitamin D3 supplement to fill that gap and improve the way your brain ages and improve the way you age in general. There are many different ways in which vitamin D is improving brain function. For one, it's involved in actually clearing out amyloid beta so that it doesn't stay around to form protein aggregates. The protein aggregates are the problem. Again, as I mentioned, it regulates many different genes that are involved in immune function. And in the brain, we have a type, our resident immune cells in the brain are glial cells and astrocytes. They can act as like our immune cells in the brain. And what happens is when those cells become dysfunctional, they can cause neuroinflammation. And neuroinflammation is now known to be the #1 cause in dementia and Alzheimer's disease and brain aging. So vitamin D helps lower that. It also plays a role in enhancing neuroplasticity. Brain-derived neurotrophic factor is also increased by vitamin D. Neuroplasticity is very important. It decreases with age. It's the ability of our brain to adapt to a changing environment. You want your brain to be more plastic. You want it to be able to adapt. And so brain-derived neurotrophic factor is one of the most robust and important ways that our brain stays malleable as we age. And vitamin D plays a role because it activates the gene that makes brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And then lastly, it's also very important for mitochondrial function. Again, you want your mitochondria to be functioning properly. And vitamin D is regulating a lot of genes that are important for mitochondrial function. And mitochondria are basically the way our cells are making energy, and your brain needs to make energy to function properly. Without energy, things start to go wrong. So, how do you know if you're getting enough vitamin D3? You can get a simple blood test. You want to be in the sufficient range. So deficiency would be less than 20 nanograms per milliliter. If you're insufficient, that would be less than 30 nanograms per milliliter. So between 20 to 30 or 20 to 29 would be insufficient. Sufficient would be above 30 for sure. Ideally, you can be 40 to 60. Now I'm 40 to 80 nanograms per milliliter. You want to be in that sweet spot. You want to have adequate levels of vitamin D3. We know about 4,000 to 5,000 IUs, international units per day, usually gets people within that sweet spot, but everyone is different. Some people have those genes that make those enzymes that produce the vitamin D hormone not as efficient, and some people actually have to supplement with a higher dose. The only way you're really going to know is to take a vitamin D blood test after you're supplementing to make sure that you're getting the right dose for you. Okay, so let's move on to talk about the next really important micronutrient, and that is omega-3. As the name implies, there are actually 3 different fatty acids. There's ALA, that's the omega-3 that's found in plant forms like walnuts, chia seeds, flax seeds. And then there's EPA and DHA, that's the marine version of the omega-3 found in seafood, also found in microalgae. There was a study out of Harvard a few years back that identified the top 6 preventable causes of death in the US. And it identified not getting enough of the marine omega-3 fatty acids from seafood as one of those top 6, up there with not smoking, avoiding hypertension, not getting type 2 diabetes. Not getting enough seafood was up there with those diseases, and yet nobody's talking about it. In fact, it was found that not getting enough seafood from your diet was responsible for about 84,000 deaths per year, even more than having too much trans fat in your diet, which was associated with 82,000 deaths per year. I mean, they're pretty much the same. My point is that you walk into any supermarket and you'll see marketing on everything, zero trans fat, zero trans fat. Everybody knows that it's not good for your health to eat trans fats. It's all over the place. But nobody's thinking about what we're not getting from our diet, what we're not getting from our food that we're supposed to, that's actually causing a similar amount of death, right? Omega-3 fatty acids. So omega-3s, and particularly the EPA and DHA, those are the ones that we're going to focus on. Those are the ones that are the most important, play a very profound role in the way we age. First and foremost, we're going to talk about cardiovascular health. There is just a mountain of evidence showing that omega-3 fatty acids are very important for cardiovascular health. You can measure the levels of your EPA and DHA and omega-3 through a test called the omega-3 index test. That measures the amount of omega-3 fatty acids in your red blood cells and really tells you how much omega-3 you're getting from your diet, how much you're getting from supplementation. This was developed by my friend and colleague, Dr. Bill Harris. He published a study showing that people that have a high omega-3 index, that is, they are supplementing, they're getting seafood, high omega-3 index would be 8% or higher, have a 90% reduced sudden cardiac death risk than people with a low omega-3 index. That would be 4% or lower. And if you think about cardiovascular disease is the #1 killer in the United States and also in most developed nations. Every 30 seconds in the United States, someone's dying from a heart attack. Sudden cardiac death is responsible for a lot of deaths in the United States, and just having a high omega-3 index is lowering that risk by 90%. That's incredible. We also know that within that same study, this was the Framingham cohort, this is a very large data set of people, those individuals with, again, the high omega-3 index of 8% or more had a 5-year increased life expectancy compared to people with the low omega-3 index. And if we look at the average omega-3 index of people in the United States, we're at about 4 to 5%. People are not eating enough seafood here. People are not supplementing with omega-3 here in the United States. Compare that to Japan. Japan, they eat a ton of seafood. Their omega-3 index, on average, is about 10%. So they're above that high they're in that high range, and they have a 5-year increased life expectancy compared to people in the United States, both for the men and women. That's obviously just a correlation there, but it's important to point out because, again, they're eating a lot of seafood over there, and they have a very high omega-3 index. But what I think is so profound about this data, in addition to the 90% reduced sudden cardiac risk, in addition to the 5-year increased life expectancy compared to people with a low omega-3, is if you stratify that data and you look at smokers versus non-smokers. Everybody knows that smoking is bad for you. Unfortunately, I think most people, when they think about smoking, they're thinking about lung cancer risk. They're thinking about cancer, which is a valid concern. However, your cancer risk increases linearly. So the more cigarettes, the more packs you smoke per month, the higher the lung cancer risk. What people aren't realizing is that smoking is one of the worst things you can do for your heart. It's one of the worst things you can do for your cardiovascular health and your vascular system. It is so damaging for your arteries and your blood vessels and your myocardium and your heart. It doesn't increase in a linear fashion. As you smoke, just a few cigarettes, you are exponentially increasing your cardiovascular disease risk. So, when you look at smokers versus non-smokers, what's crazy, and I love showing this graph, because if you look at that green line, those are the healthy people, those are the health-conscious people, those are the non-smokers that are eating their seafood and taking their omega-3 supplements. They have the high omega-3 index. Their life expectancy is the longest. If you look at the red curve, those are the most unhealthy people. They're smoking, they're not taking omega-3, they're not eating their seafood. They have the lowest life expectancy. But if you look at the orange and blue curves, they almost perfectly overlay. And that is what is so astonishing to me, because what we're looking at is non-smokers with a low omega-3 index. So those people know smoking is bad, so they don't smoke, but they're not eating their fish and they're not taking an omega-3 supplement. They have the same life expectancy as smokers who have a high omega-3 index. So these are smokers that are eating their seafood and taking omega-3 supplements. So it's like basically having a low omega-3 index was like smoking in terms of their life expectancy. And when I show this data to people, people will come up to me afterwards and they're smokers, and they're like, I'm taking my omega-3. And it's like, no, you're missing the point here. You're missing the point. What I'm talking about is all the non-smokers here, because we all know smoking is bad for us, but you're not taking an omega-3 supplement. It's like smoking. And when you tell people that, it's like, whoa, what? Are you kidding me? So this is why I like to focus on these low-hanging fruits. What are we not getting from our diet? What are we not supplementing with that's having a very profound effect on our cardiovascular risk and our overall life expectancy and the way we age? And we do know that omega-3 fatty acids, in general, are very good for cardiovascular health. We also have randomized placebo-controlled trials, very large trials, that have shown this. So, for example, in people for high risk for cardiovascular disease, those individuals that were taking about 4 grams a day of a purified form of EPA for 5 years lowered their cardiovascular events, so this is including stroke, heart attacks, these cardiovascular events, by 25% compared to people taking a placebo. That's very profound for a clinical trial in just looking at a, omega-3 fish oil supplement. We also have, that was the Reduce It trial. We have the Strength trial. That trial was stopped early because there really wasn't showing any benefit. It was the form of omega-3. They were giving it in free fatty acid form, which is not necessarily the best form. And then we had the VITAL study. This was a very low dose of omega-3. It was less than a gram. It was 840 milligrams a day for about 5 years. And when you look at the secondary analysis at things like heart attack or stroke, that was also associated with a lower risk. So you had about 70% lower total coronary heart disease and about 30% lower heart attack risk compared to a placebo. So really, we're just looking at really strong evidence here, and there's a lot of reasons why omega-3 fatty acids are really good for cardiovascular health. One is because it's one of the best ways you can lower inflammation. These omega-3 fatty acids get metabolized in your body into a variety of metabolically active compounds, resolvins, myrisins, the protectins. These compounds are resolving inflammation, because inflammation is happening all the time in our bodies. It's happening right now as you're listening to me talk. It's happening to me as I'm speaking. Our dietary choices, our lifestyle choices can accelerate and exacerbate that inflammation. And one of the ways to lower it is by making sure we're getting enough omega-3, because it really is the best way to resolve inflammation. You do want your body to be able to produce inflammation. That's how you fight off pathogens. But you just don't want it to be out of control. Omega-3s are really that lever that you pull to kind of make sure it's happening at the right time, but not ongoing chronically, which is accelerating aging. The other way that omega-3 fatty acids are playing a very profound role in our cardiovascular system and improving our hearts and our vascular system is because they get incorporated into our cell membranes, all of our membranes in our cells. And these are the cells that are lining our arteries, our veins, our heart, and it makes them more flexible. It does the opposite of what trans fat does. Trans fat stiffens them, makes it stiff. The omega-3s are making them flexible so they can adapt. If there's something wrong, it's able to adapt to that. And that's why sudden cardiac death is lowered so dramatically, because you need to have a flexible heart in order to deal with a heart attack and not die from it. So really, really important ways that omega-3s are improving the way our heart is aging. It also plays a role in the way our body is aging, biological aging. So I told you we'd talk a little bit more in detail about this. I just want to mention, everyone in here is a certain age. We all have a chronological number. We all know how old we are from the time we were born to today. And that really is how we kind of identify as how old we are, right? Well, it turns out that, the cells in our body have been around for that same amount of time. But depending on the lifestyle choices, the dietary choices that we make throughout our life, that can affect how our organs are aging, how each organ in our body is aging, how our cells are aging. And so even though you could be 45 years old, if you're vitamin D deficient, if you're omega-3 deficient, if you're not exercising, you're overweight, you could actually biologically look like a 65-year-old, but be 45. And the opposite is true. If you're 45 and you're doing all the right things, you're eating a healthy diet, you're not overweight, you're exercising, you're making sure you're getting all the right micronutrients and vitamins and minerals and essential fatty acids, all these things, you can actually biologically look much younger. You could look like a 30-year-old, right? So really important to realize that the choices we make do affect the way we age, but also that it's never too late, and we're going to talk about that as well. So omega-3, I would say, is one of the essential fatty acids that's really been shown to play a role in the way we age, and I think that has a lot to do with the dampening of inflammation, because inflammation is one of the drivers of accelerating the way we age in multiple organs in our body. There are multiple studies out there showing that higher omega-3 intake does slow biological aging. It takes about 1.1 grams a day to get to that point for the most part, although men seem to be a little more sensitive. They can get away with a little bit of a lower dose, probably because they've got more inflammation, so anything's helping them, but they can get away with a little bit of a lower dose, about 460 milligrams a day. So that is important. For the women out there, it takes us about 1.1 grams a day to start to see that you can, this is a curve here on biological aging, you can start to see it go down as you get to that 1.1 gram a day level. But we also have randomized controlled trials. And this is, by the way, that study I just showed you is just one example. There's so many studies out there showing that high omega-3 intake. In fact, I'm about to publish a study showing that higher omega-3 index levels are associated with slowing biological aging by multiple different aging clocks that are measured. So this study is a randomized controlled trial. That's about the highest evidence that you can get. So this study was done in Switzerland. In Switzerland, I was just there. People are a little more health conscious out there. They tend to exercise a lot. A lot of people actually take a vitamin D3 supplement. Not everyone they don't eat a lot of fish. And so not everyone was taking an omega-3 supplement. So the starting population in this study was, I would say, mostly healthy, more on the healthy side. But it showed that omega-3 alone was able to slow biological aging in this population compared to a placebo control. This was a 3-year study. When they added vitamin D to it, again, they were already taking vitamin D, so they got a little bit more of a boost. It slowed biological aging by about 3.3 months. And then when they added resistance training on top of that, they got almost a 4-month reduction. And you might go, well, 4 months, that's nothing. But it's cumulative, right? So as you keep year after year after year after year chronologically, getting older, you're slowing your biological aging by 4 months, and that adds up. And it's really a simple solution, right? We're talking about if you don't like seafood, but also even if you like seafood, it's hard to get to a high omega-3 index. Also, unfortunately, a lot of our seafood is polluted right now, so it really is easy to take a omega-3 supplement. But, and more importantly, this biological aging, for some people, it's very abstract. I mean, it sounds cool, it's a little sensational. It is real. Like there are little spots on your DNA that scientists can measure that really can track your biological age. But what you really want to know is, well, what kind of functional outcome does that correlate with? Okay, I'm slowing my aging, but what about my disease risk, right? In that same study, those individuals that had only a 3.8-month slowing of their biological age, that was associated with a 13% reduced risk of getting infections, 13% risk of falls, decreased risk of having a fall, a 40% reduction in a battery of tests that are done to measure pre-frailty, and a 61% reduced risk in invasive cancer. So that 4 months of slowing your biological age has a profound effect on these outcomes that we all care about, right? And as I mentioned, it's cumulative over time. So it just keeps happening and keeps getting better. Very important. Okay, I'm going to switch gears, and as we wrap the vitamin supplement up, we are gonna get into some of the take-homes. I see that I'm running. Boy, I talk slow. Only got 10 minutes, so I'm gonna speed up my cadence a little bit. Magnesium is another really important micronutrient. It's a mineral. We have to get it from our diet. Half of the U.S. population has insufficient levels of magnesium. Magnesium is a cofactor that is regulating over 300 enzymes in your body, including the ones that are important for making ATP. That's the energetic currency of our cells. If you don't have enough magnesium, you're not going to make enough energy. It also plays a role in repairing damage to our DNA so that we don't get cancer, so that we don't accelerate aging. The reason so many people are not getting enough is because magnesium is found at the center of a chlorophyll molecule. Chlorophyll gives plants their green color, which means people are not eating their dark leafy greens, unfortunately. Dark leafy greens, almonds, those are really nuts, seeds, oats, those are really good sources of magnesium. Women need to get around 320 milligrams a day. Men need to get about 420 milligrams a day. We know from nutrition surveys that they're getting, most on average, are getting about 100 milligrams less than that. So they're not meeting that requirement. And this is problematic because, as I mentioned, magnesium is required for 300 different enzymes. It's really important for your stability of your genome, your DNA. We're constantly getting damage to our DNA. It's happening all the time. Oxidative stress. It's a byproduct of just every time you eat a meal. It's a byproduct of immune activation. It's just happening constantly. And what happens is when you get strand breaks in your DNA, your body repairs it because it doesn't want it to happen in a part of the genome that can lead to cancer, right? So it's a very important process. Unfortunately, if you're not getting enough magnesium, that's not happening very efficiently. And we know that for every 100 milligram decrease in magnesium intake, there is a 24% increase in pancreatic cancer risk. So it goes up. As you keep going down in magnesium, your risk goes up and up. We also know that people that are on the low end of magnesium intake from nutritional surveys have a 50% higher cancer mortality, 50% higher, and a 40% higher all-cause mortality than people that are actually on the high end and getting enough magnesium. Magnesium is also really important for bone health. Everyone's focused on vitamin D and calcium when they're thinking about nutritional factors that play a role in bone health. Did you know that 60% of the magnesium in your body is stored in your bones? 60%. And because people are not getting enough magnesium from their diet, your body pulls from your bones, it's a reserve, it pulls from your bones to maintain plasma levels of magnesium because it's so important to maintain a certain level of magnesium in your plasma. And so over time, over years and years and years, your body keeps pulling the magnesium. It's like pulling from that retirement fund early. So the point when you start to age, and if you're a woman, when you fall off that cliff and estrogen goes down, you're in big trouble. Osteoporosis, osteopenia, these are the diseases that hit. We know that nearly half the magnesium in your bones is lost over a lifetime as you're aging. So the deficiency does increase the risk of osteoporosis for a variety of reasons. It plays a role in bone remodeling. It plays a role in helping the body make more bone. It plays a role in helping the body prevent breaking down bone. So it's doing a lot of different jobs. And why is that? Well, magnesium is regulating 300 enzymes in the body. Some of them are involved in bone health. So very important to try to maintain magnesium levels. And then in general, so we talked about omega-3, vitamin D, magnesium. In general, if you look here, Americans are not getting enough of these micronutrients. So we talked about vitamin D. 60% of the US is not getting enough vitamin E. Calcium, 35% not getting enough calcium, 35% not getting enough vitamin K, 25% of people not getting enough vitamin C, 8% not getting enough zinc. So you can see the pattern here. 90% of people not getting enough omega-3. It's really apparent that people are not getting these important micronutrients from their diets. And so there's a simple solution to that, a multivitamin. A multivitamin can hit many of these different micronutrients along with taking an omega-3. So I want to talk about why multivitamins are actually really important for the way we age. And I remember 10 years ago, the headlines out there, multivitamins are useless, they're harmful, you don't need them, it's expensive urine. That's wrong. It's completely wrong. We now have, it's totally wrong. It's totally wrong. This is going to blow your mind. We now have 3 large randomized controlled trials. This is part of the Cosmos studies showing that the easiest thing you can do for your health, for your parents, for your grandparents, for your friends, is take a multivitamin supplement, and it's affecting the way you age. So we know. And it's never too late. Okay, so these Cosmos studies were done in older adults. They're 65 years and older. They took a multivitamin for 3 years or a placebo control for 3 years. Those older adults that took the multivitamin lowered their brain aging, global brain aging, by 2 years. 2 years. And they lowered their episodic brain aging by almost 5 years. Insane. Episodic memory is the kind of memory where you're remembering like people, events, the things that like your parents and grandparents seem to never remember. So 5 years, okay? And now we have new data showing that it also lowers biological aging. Easiest thing you can do is a multivitamin, and 3 large studies showing that. So anyone that's telling you multivitamins are useless, arm them with the data. Cosmos studies. All right, summarize this data because we got to get to the NAD. Vitamin D, 4,000 IUs a day. Blood test, you want to be above 30 nanograms per milliliter. Omega-3 fatty acids, we know from studies by Bill Harris, supplementing with around 1.5 to 2 grams a day. In most people, it brings them from a low omega-3 index of 4% to the 8% range where you want to be. Multivitamin doesn't get easier than that. And then magnesium is something that you can also supplement with in addition to eating your dark leafy greens because we still need to eat a healthy diet. Okay, we're going to shift gears and talk about NAD. What is NAD and why is it important for aging? So NAD, nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide, it's actually NAD+, but I'm just going to call it an NAD. This molecule is required to make energy. Very, very important. It's not energy itself, but in order for your body to use the food that you eat, to use the oxygen that you breathe in, because both those things are how our bodies make energy, you have to have NAD to do that. Without NAD, you cannot make energy. So it's crucial for everything, right? Because everything requires energy, everything that we're doing, neurotransmitter, repairing DNA, immune function, right? Everything. But in addition to that, it's also a cofactor for many different enzymes. Like I talked about magnesium, it's doing the same thing. And we're going to talk a little bit about that because there's some important enzymes that it is a cofactor. What I mean by cofactor is it kind of like binds to that enzyme and makes it function optimally. And when it doesn't do that, that enzyme isn't functioning correctly, right? So it's not really doing its job. It's a problem. It declines with age, and let's talk about why it declines with age. So our bodies can make NAD from different precursors like vitamin B3 precursors, niacin, nicotinamide, tryptophan also to a lesser extent. But the real reason that our bodies are declining in terms of NAD with age isn't necessarily because we can't make it, it's because our bodies are consuming it so much due to inflammation, increases in inflammation, and due to increases in oxidative stress that are happening with age. And if you add on obesity, metabolic syndrome, type 2 diabetes, if you add on all these other diseases, then we're talking massive, massive problems because there's a lot of inflammation and oxidative stress going on. So it's the cellular demand that's happening as we age that's really causing our bodies to consume NAD. One of the biggest consumers of NAD in our body is from an enzyme called PARP, P-A-R-P. And what this enzyme does is it repairs damage to our DNA. It's very, very important. As I mentioned, if you have damage to your DNA, particularly if it's on both strands, it can cause genome instability. It makes cells age faster and not function correctly. But more importantly, it also increases cancer risk, which is why cancer risk is an age-related disease. It starts to increase in our 50s, 60s, 70s, right? So as we're getting older, we're having a lot more oxidative stress. PARP is literally a sink. It is just massively consuming that NAD. And so what happens is other enzymes that are involved also in the way we age, like sirtuins, for example. Sirtuins need NAD to function. These are also important enzymes that are changing the way we age because they're regulating a lot of different genes. They're histone deacetylases. That means they're basically epigenetically changing hundreds of different genes, many that are involved in the way our mitochondria are working. Our mitochondria are what's making energy. It's involved in lowering inflammation, in allowing our cells to be more resilient. So it's regulating a lot of different genes that helps our body deal with the stress of aging, deal with the stress of, maybe you went out and partied that night, right? So your body can handle it a little bit better. When sirtuins are not being able to be activated, that's not happening. And they're not activated because the PARP is consuming them so much. And the PARP is consuming them so much because we're increasing our inflammation and oxidative stress as we age. So it's a kind of this cascade problem that's happening that all points back to a shortage of NAD. And so some solutions that have now this is a growing field. I mentioned that our bodies can make our bodies can make NAD from vitamin B3 precursors like nicotinamide or niacin. Tryptophan is another one that can be, shunted into that pathway. But there are other precursors as well. Nicotinamide mononucleotide, NMN, is a big one that's being studied. It's also part of the pathway that it's involved in producing NAD. It's actually the step before making NAD. You can't actually supplement with NAD itself because our cells make it. There's no way to transport it into the body. And so supplementing with NAD itself doesn't work. You have to have the precursor like NMN, nicotinamide mononucleotide, in order to get that NAD. And there have now been a variety of studies that have been looking at nicotinamide mononucleotide, so supplementing with it in clinical populations. And like I said, this is a brand new field, very exciting. We have some new clinical data, if you look at the scientific literature, that supplementing with NMN, early studies show LDL reductions, so LDL cholesterol can lead to cardiovascular disease. We show that there's studies showing that diastolic blood pressure is lowered with NMN supplementation. Metabolic health is improved, so even as little as 250 milligrams a day for 10 weeks, improved insulin sensitivity in muscles in postmenopausal women. And also we know that there's a really good bioavailability. So taking NMN in a higher dose, like 1,000 milligrams a day, this is like a real high-end dose, it actually doubles the NAD levels in our blood for about 14 days. In terms of exercise performance, this is another field I'm pretty excited about. There's studies showing that supplementing between 600 to 1,200 milligrams a day can improve oxygen delivery during exercise. Again, coming down to energy production. But it's not just about energy, it's also about not making sure that serotonins also get that NAD, right? You want to make sure PARP isn't consuming it all. So this is a really exciting new area. NAD is important for the way we age, and the fact that there's now clinical studies showing that NMN supplementation can increase NAD levels and have, outcomes that are beneficial is very exciting. I'm really excited to continue looking at the field. So, in conclusion, we want to avoid micronutrient deficiencies. We talked about that. NAD plays an important role in aging. We want to not have such high inflammation and oxidative stress, but also it's promising that there might be ways around that in terms of taking some of these NAD precursors to increase our NAD. And with that, thank you so much. Sorry the last part was accelerated, but I hope you learned something. Thank you.
Shaklee family, Dr. Rhonda Patrick. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Roger.
We're going to just have a little chat. I can tell you that I was sitting in the audience there. First of all, you did such an amazing job, and you're such a hip, cool scientist explaining all this to us. And all I could say is, oh my gosh, I am so grateful for Shaklee that I've been taking all the products that Dr. Rhonda Patrick has said it's going to help me live younger, longer. And I want to just take a moment to shout out to our Shaklee scientists because now I'm going to test my mental acuity, okay? You had a multivitamin, which was critical, the omega-3s. By the way, we did an omega-3 index study with our Shaklee population, and it's double the US population, so it's the equivalent of the Japan population. So omega-3s, magnesium, NMN is a precursor. Imagine that's all in one Life Essentials pack that's in our BioAge Reset Stack. But let me ask you a question, Dr. Patrick. I'm sure everybody here would like to have you along with them as they're talking to a customer, but we're all lay people here trying to give the message of scientifically validated information. How would you suggest somebody to explain how somebody could live younger, longer? What would be the one or two things that you could help everybody here communicate out there in the world?
I think the message, of my message for today really is that, look, we are not getting enough of these important vitamins and minerals and fatty acids from our diet. And I don't know that we're going to change that because it's much harder to do dietary studies and to make people eat differently. But we can supplement with these vitamins and minerals and fatty acids. And they are going to make a huge difference in the way you age. They're going to lower your disease risk, delay your disease risk so that you're healthy and active and happy when you're in your 70s, when you're in your 80s, when you're in your 90s, and you can go surfing, and you can play tennis, and you can pick up basketball, or whatever it is that you love to do in your leisure time, and you'll continue doing it and enjoy your loved ones. So really, I think the message is it's simple. Yes, there are exercise and a lot of things that require more effort are important, but the easiest thing that you can do and focus on is really taking that vitamin, mineral, omega-3 supplement. And we have data, we have a lot of data that it's going to lower your disease risk and it's going to slow aging.
Why do you think, Dr. Patrick, I've been in conversations with some people who continue to say that a multivitamin is just a waste and there's no scientifically, clinically proven evidence that a multivitamin does something. And your answer is?
They're wrong. Completely wrong. They couldn't be more wrong. And I will say it, I will scream it, I will sing it, I will do whatever it takes to get that message out there. Because I think, for one, people don't realize how important these vitamins and minerals are for the way we age. They think it's not important, and that's the key is that there's so many different vitamins and minerals that we're not getting from our diet, and the multivitamin fills that gap. It fills that gap, and over time, it will be apparent that we're aging better. So I don't know if it's because doctors haven't been educated and they're the ones getting that message out there, but we need to re-educate them. We need to re-educate them.
Yeah. I think, you have such passion, and for folks out there, the speech that Dr. Patrick just gave, there's no notes, there's no anything. It's coming from her brain and her heart. And first, I think I want to thank you for your passion in sharing information with people. Tell us, what was the spark in your life or academic career that made you decide that you want to make this your life's work?
Well, there's many different sparks. For one, as I was working in the lab, as I was doing clinical studies in nutrition, I realized how much you can make a difference in your disease risk and the way you age by these different nutritional factors. And to me, it was like, why is this evidence and data not getting out to the public? Why is it taking 10 years, if at all, right? And so that was number one, where I realized, wow, this has a profound effect. Nobody's talking about it. And I think the second thing was I realized that I learned so much more from the conversations I was having with my colleagues, around the coffee table or in our cubicles, rather than reading scientific papers that were just so overwhelming and kind of like this black hole. And so I started a podcast over 10 years ago, and I was like, I'm just going to bring this stuff to people and cut out everyone else and just give them the real science and let them have it and do with it what they want. Learn, share, preach it, everything, right? So, and I get chills because I just love giving people information that they can then use in the way that they choose to use it, whether they're a business, small business, or they're just helping their family members. And I get people come up to me all the time and talk about what a big difference the information I've shared with them has made in their lives and their families' lives and their peers' lives. And it's just incredibly satisfying, and I feel like this sense of purpose where I just love it. So I love that people also love it, and that we're all trying to help people get healthier, because so many people think that the way we age is in our genes, and it's really not. Maybe 30% of it is, but 70 to 80% actually has to do with our lifestyle choices, our dietary choices. So we have control, and we just need to, arm people with the power. And when I say dietary and lifestyle choices, I don't mean treating disease after you get it. I'm talking about preventing disease. That's the key.
We opened our session today with the kind of words of our founder, Dr. Shaklee, who developed the first multivitamin in the United States 111 years ago. And that was the message that he was talking about. And I think it's so wonderful to have somebody with your research background to be aligned with that. And I really do believe that the Shaklee family, that everyone here has the power to convey that information. And I've always said that the magic of getting somebody to have a health outcome is information, a product solution, and then a community to support and encourage them. So I think you're going to have many thousands more podcast followers after today. And I want to thank you for inspiring it, and I want to thank our Shaklee family for taking this information. You have to share this. The results, it's a simple intervention that can have a meaningful impact of how people age, and I think we're all on that same common mission. So, Shaklee family, please give a warm thank you to Dr. Rhonda Patrick. Dr. Patrick, thank you for spending your precious time with us today. You're really awesome.
Thank
Dr.
you,
Patrick.
You're awesome. Thank you.
Shaklee family, how y'all feeling? Make some noise!